My name is Adam Thompson, and today I'm going to tell you the story of how I lost everything because of the person I trusted the most, my own mother. I worked my entire life to build a home, a future, and a sense of stability after growing up without a father. I thought that if I gave my mother everything she never had, comfort, security, and a place to call home, she'd be proud of me. I was wrong. She wasn't proud. She was reckless. She gambled away the house I spent years saving for, vanished with the money, and left me standing in the ruins of the life I built. And it all started with a single overheard phone call. I remember that night vividly. I'd left work early after a long client meeting, hoping to relax with a beer and maybe catch the Lakers game. As I stepped through the front door, the familiar scent of lavender air freshener mixed with the faint aroma of burnt toast greeted me. But instead of hearing the TV or the clinking of dishes in the sink, I heard my mother's voice, low and urgent from the kitchen. I paused, my hand still on the doorknob. She sounded scared. No, not scared. Nervous. "Yeah, Greg," she whispered, her voice just audible over the hum of the fridge. "The house sale's almost done. We should have the funds by next week." "No, Adam doesn't know. Why would he?" "I'm on the deed." My breath caught in my throat. House sale? My house? The living room spun. I forced myself to step forward. My heartbeat roared in my ears as I crossed the threshold into the kitchen. My mother's eyes widened when she saw me standing there. Her phone was still pressed to her ear. Without breaking eye contact, she ended the call. "Who were you talking to, Mom?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, forcing a smile. "It's nothing. Just a refinancing thing. Don't worry about it." "Refinancing," I repeated. My gaze dropped to the phone in her hand. Her knuckles were white. "You said house sale. Are you selling the house?" "Of course not," she snapped too quickly. "You must have misheard." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. This was my mom, the woman who'd raised me, who taught me how to ride a bike, who hugged me through every scraped knee and teenage heartbreak. But something about her tone, the flicker of panic in her eyes, lodged deep in my chest. That night, long after she'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I logged into the county's property records system, entered our address, and waited. When the screen loaded, my stomach dropped. Property under contract. Scheduled closing date, 5 days. The room blurred. I rubbed my eyes, willing the words to disappear. They didn't. My mother hadn't refinanced the house. She'd sold it, and she'd done it behind my back. I sat there until dawn, scrolling through the documents she'd forged with shaky signatures that mimicked mine. My name, my home, my trust, all gone. When the first rays of sunlight crept through the window, I made myself a cup of coffee and waited. I heard her shuffle into the kitchen a little after 7. She froze when she saw me sitting there, the laptop open on the table. "Sit down, Mom," I said softly. Her smile faltered. "Why? What's all this?" I turned the screen toward her. The contract glared like a neon sign. Her face went pale. "How long?" My voice cracked. "How long have you been planning this?" Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes shifted toward the door as if she were calculating the distance. "I did it for us," she whispered. "The market's crazy right now. Greg said it's a sure thing. We take the money, invest it, and in 6 months we'll buy a bigger house." "Greg? Who the hell is Greg?" "My partner," she said, voice small. "He knows the crypto market better than anyone. He promised..." "Crypto?" I slammed my fist on the table, sending the coffee mug skidding across the surface. "You sold our house for some get-rich-quick scam?" "It's not a scam," she snapped, tears springing to her eyes. You just don't get it, Adam. You always play it safe. That's why you'll never make it big. I was trying to help us. I pushed the chair back and stood. My entire body trembled. You didn't help us. You destroyed us. Linda didn't answer. She just sat there, eyes locked on the screen. The contract still glowed between us, a digital tombstone for the life we once shared. And that was the moment I realized I no longer recognized the person sitting across from me. The days after I discovered the house sale were a blur. I remember standing in the living room that morning, staring at the sunlight streaming through the windows. It hit the floorboards in long, golden lines, the same floors I'd spent weeks sanding and staining when we first moved in. Back then, Mom had sat on the couch, watching me work, sipping her tea with a proud smile. You've really built something, sweetheart, she'd said. I'd smiled back, never once imagining she'd tear it all apart. The next few days passed like a bad dream. I went to work, came home, and went to bed. I didn't confront Mom right away. I wanted to, but I needed time to think. Time to hope, irrationally, that there was some explanation that made sense. But the facts were there, glaring at me from my laptop screen every night. The house was under contract, and the closing date was only days away. On the third night, I stayed late at the office. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting across the dinner table from her again. Around 9, my phone buzzed. Ryan. I ignored it. I didn't want to talk to anyone, but he called again, and then again. On the fourth call, I picked up. Dude, where have you been? He asked. I stopped by your place earlier. Your mom said you were working late every night. What's going on? I don't even know where to start. I told him everything. The crypto obsession, the phone call, the forged documents. By the time I finished, Ryan was silent for a long time. Jesus, he said finally. So, what are you going to do? I don't know. The sale closes in 2 days. I can't stop it. She's the legal owner. Damn. Another long pause. Look, man, you know you can crash at my place if you need to. Thanks, I said, though I wasn't sure what I needed. I'll figure something out. When I finally got home, Mom was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled. Late night again, huh? I didn't answer. I just walked past her and went straight to my room. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and went to the kitchen. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I found her sitting at the table, cradling her coffee mug like she hadn't slept either. We need to talk, I said. She sighed. Adam, honey, please don't make a big deal out of this. You sold the house, I said. My voice shook. You sold everything I worked for. Everything we had. For us, she insisted, her voice rising. To build something bigger. Greg said, Greg? I cut her off. Who the hell is Greg? She flinched. He's a friend. He knows the market. He's made a fortune with crypto. He said if we just reinvest... Stop. I slammed my fist on the counter. Stop saying we. You did this. You sold the house. You forged my name. You gambled our future for some guy who promised you easy money. Her eyes filled with tears. I was trying to help us, she whispered. You helped yourself, I said through clenched teeth. She didn't deny it. Instead, she turned away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to tell her we could fix it. But the papers didn't lie, and neither did the look of guilt in her eyes. The house closed 2 days later. I came home from work to find the living room half empty. The TV was gone, along with the antique clock my grandfather had given me. I went upstairs to my bedroom and found my nightstand drawer open. My father's old watch, The only thing he'd left behind when he walked out was missing. I sat on the edge of the bed, numb. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thanks for everything. I hope you'll understand one day. Mom." I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I stood, grabbed my duffel bag, and walked out. I didn't look back. I don't remember much about the day the house sold. I think I was at work, staring blankly at my computer screen while my phone buzzed with email notifications I couldn't bring myself to read. The official transfer happened around 2:00 p.m. The only reason I knew that was because the notification popped up on my banking app. Mortgage account closed. I stared at the words for a long time, willing them to make sense. But they didn't. They felt foreign, like someone else's tragedy flashing across my screen. That evening, I drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the low hum of the car engine and the sharp sting of betrayal lodged in my chest. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was off, a strange sight. Mom always turned it on for me. I stepped out, keys in hand, and noticed the "sold" sign staked into the lawn. The red letters stood stark against the fading twilight. My stomach twisted. I climbed the steps, unlocked the door, and stepped into a house that was no longer mine. The living room was half empty. The coffee table I built last summer? Gone. The bookshelf Mom and I assembled together when we first moved in? Empty. My gaze landed on the wall where our family photos had hung. The nails were still there, jutting out like broken teeth, but the frames were gone. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawers. The silverware was missing. Even the ceramic mug that said, "World's Okayest Mom," had disappeared. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. The betrayal wasn't just about the house or the money. It was the erasure of everything we'd built together. Every memory, every shared laugh, every piece of our life, gone, like it had never existed. Footsteps sounded behind me. I turned to see Mom standing in the doorway. She wore a puffy jacket and clutched a suitcase in one hand. Her expression was a mixture of guilt and defiance. "You're leaving," I said flatly. She nodded. I didn't want you to find out like this." "How did you want me to find out?" My voice was ice. "When I came home to strangers living here?" "Adam, please. I had no choice." "You always had a choice." She shifted uncomfortably. "Greg says this crypto deal is going to pay off soon. We just needed a little more liquidity. Once it hits, we'll be set." "Greg?" I laughed bitterly. "You're still listening to that clown? He conned you, Mom. He took the money and ran." "He didn't. He's in Vegas, setting up new accounts. We're going to bounce back." "We?" I stepped closer. "There is no we, Mom. Not anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her gaze dropped to the floor. After a long silence, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My body ached with the weight of everything unsaid. I turned and walked toward the front door. She didn't stop me. In the driveway, I opened the trunk of my car and grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed the night before. I hadn't planned this departure, but somehow my subconscious had known it was coming. As I tossed the bag onto the back seat, I heard the front door close behind me. "Adam!" Mom's voice cracked through the night air. "Where are you going?" I didn't look at her. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The headlights illuminated the "sold" sign on the lawn. The house I'd fought so hard to build was no longer mine. Neither was the relationship with the woman who'd raised me. "I'm going somewhere you can't touch," I said through the open window. I shifted into gear and drove away. The rearview mirror showed Mom standing in the driveway, her suitcase at her feet, her face hidden in shadow. I kept driving until she disappeared from view. Only then did I let the tears fall. That night, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room smelled like bleach and stale smoke. I sat on the bed, scrolling through my phone, though I wasn't really reading anything. At some point, I opened the Notes app and typed one sentence. Mom sold the house today. I stared at the words until exhaustion took over. When I woke the next morning, the words were still there, sharp and undeniable. The house was gone. My mother was gone. And I was starting over from scratch. The first few weeks after leaving the house felt like moving through fog. I woke up each morning in that cramped motel room, the air thick with the sharp scent of bleach and stale smoke. My duffel bag sat in the corner like a silent reminder of everything I'd lost. The motel's beige walls, cracked tiles, and buzzing fluorescent light were a world away from the warm, sunlit kitchen I once called mine. Every morning, I opened my phone and stared at the last text Mom sent me. Thanks for everything. I hope you'll understand one day. I didn't understand. I wasn't sure if I ever would. I tried throwing myself into work, but my focus was shot. I'd sit at my desk, staring at spreadsheets while memories of the house haunted me. The sound of the front door opening, the scrape of Mom's chair against the tile floor, the hum of her voice as she scrolled through crypto forums. The more I tried to suppress those memories, the louder they became. My boss noticed, of course. One afternoon, he called me into his office. Adam, I don't know what's going on, but you've been off your game for weeks. It's personal stuff. I'll get it under control. You've always been reliable, he said, frowning. But this can't go on much longer. I nodded and left his office, shame burning my cheeks. I'd worked for years to build a solid career. Now it was slipping through my fingers, just like the house. That night, I sat on the motel bed and opened my laptop. I didn't check my emails or browse for new apartments. Instead, I searched for the one thing I'd been avoiding: crypto scams. Thousands of results flooded the screen. Articles about pump and dump schemes, forums filled with stories of ruined lives, and news reports about people like my mother who fell for promises of quick riches. One article caught my eye. Crypto con men, the rise of investment gurus preying on families. I clicked it. The story featured a photo of a man in his 40s, with slicked back hair and an oily smile. His name was Greg Larson. I felt my heart skip. Greg, the man who'd convinced my mother to sell the house. The article detailed how Greg had lured hundreds of investors into a crypto scam called BitHorizon, promising returns of 30% a month. He disappeared when the scheme collapsed, leaving his victims bankrupt. I stared at his face until my vision blurred. The next morning, I called Ryan. Hey, man, he answered groggily. It's 6 a.m. What's up? I found him. The guy who scammed Mom. Ryan swore under his breath. Jesus, what are you going to do? I don't know, but I need to find her before he does. That afternoon, I visited Dr. Simmons. I hadn't planned on talking about Greg, but the moment I sat down, the words spilled out. I found the guy who got her into crypto, I said, voice tight. Greg Larson. He's a professional scammer. And how does that make you feel? Simmons asked. Angry, confused. Part of me wants to warn her. Part of me wants to let her learn the hard way. Simmons nodded. What do you think will help you heal? I don't know. I rubbed my temples. She sold the house. She didn't care how it affected me. True, he said gently. But what matters now is how you choose to move forward. I left the session with no answers. I drove around aimlessly until I found myself outside a woodworking shop I'd seen before but never entered. I walked in and inhaled the familiar scent of fresh-cut lumber. The owner, an older man named Frank, noticed me lingering by the workbenches. You a woodworker? He asked. Used to be. College hobby. Need to clear your head? Grab some wood. First hour's free. I hesitated, then picked up a block of walnut and a sanding block. As I sanded, the world narrowed to the texture beneath my fingers, the rhythm of each stroke. The ache in my chest softened, if only for a moment. I started coming back every night after work. I made cutting boards, picture frames, and finally, a chair. A solid, handcrafted chair, something tangible that no scam or betrayal could take from me. One evening as I was cleaning up, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned to see a woman with auburn hair tied in a messy bun. "That's a beautiful chair," she said. "Walnut, right?" "Yeah, strong, durable." She smiled. "I'm Claire. I come here sometimes for inspiration. I do photography." "Adam." I shook her hand, the warmth of her grip unfamiliar but comforting. "You seem focused," she said. "It's the only thing that makes sense lately." She tilted her head. "Want to grab a coffee and tell me about it?" I almost said no. The last thing I wanted was to relive the story of my mother, the house, the betrayal. But something in Claire's expression, a quiet understanding, made me reconsider. "Yeah," I said, brushing sawdust from my jeans. "I think I do." The phone call came late on a Thursday night. Claire and I had just finished cleaning up after dinner when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. I swiped the screen and lifted the phone to my ear. "Adam? It's Amanda." Amanda. My mother's sister. We hadn't spoken in years. My chest tightened. "Amanda? What's going on?" She exhaled heavily. "It's your mom. She's in trouble." My heart sank. "What kind of trouble?" "She's been calling me non-stop. Says Greg ran off with all the money. She's in Vegas, broke and scared." I closed my eyes. Of course. Greg Larson, the crypto con man, had finally cut and run. My mother's partner had played her exactly like she had played me. "Where exactly is she?" I asked. Amanda hesitated. "She's staying at some motel off Fremont Street, the Sunrise Inn." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone for a long moment. Claire sat beside me, her hand resting on mine. "Are you going to go?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. My mind flashed back to the empty living room, the missing furniture, the text that read, "Thanks for everything. I hope you'll understand one day." Part of me wanted to leave her there, drowning in the mess she created. But another part, the son who once trusted her implicitly, needed closure. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'm going." Claire squeezed my hand. "Want me to come?" "No. I need to do this alone." The drive to Vegas was long and restless. The desert stretched endlessly on either side of the road, the vast emptiness mirroring the hollow ache in my chest. I tried to imagine what I would say when I saw her. I tried to predict what excuse she'd give this time, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found. The Sunrise Inn was even worse than I'd imagined. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting a sickly blue glow across the parking lot. The air smelled of stale beer and desperation. I parked near the entrance and climbed the rusted stairs to room 207. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. The door opened a crack. My mother stood there, hollow-eyed and trembling. "Adam," she breathed, eyes wide with disbelief. I said nothing. I just stared. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung in greasy strands. Her cheeks were sunken, her eyes bloodshot. The woman who had betrayed me, stolen my home, and vanished had become a ghost of herself. "Can I come in?" I asked. She stepped aside. The room was small and suffocating. Empty takeout containers littered the table, and a stack of crumpled receipts sat beside a cracked phone. The walls were yellowed with age, the carpet stained and frayed. My mother perched on the edge of the bed, twisting a tissue between her fingers. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I leaned against the dresser, arms crossed. "What do you want, Mom?" Tears filled her eyes. I need help. Greg, he took everything. I didn't know. He said it was a sure thing. If you could just lend me a little money, I swear I'll pay you back." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Pay me back? Like you paid back the house you stole? The money you took from me?" "I was trying to help us," she said, voice trembling. "No," I said. "You were trying to help yourself. You gambled away my future because you were chasing some fantasy, and when it all fell apart, you ran." She sobbed into her hands. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't care if you did," I said. "You signed the papers. You sold the house. You disappeared. And now, after Greg screwed you over, you suddenly remember you have a son?" "Adam, please," she begged. "I have nowhere to go." I stared at her for a long time. This woman, broken, desperate, and pitiful, wasn't the mother who raised me. That mother was gone, replaced by someone who prioritized greed over family. I thought of the nights I spent sanding wood in that garage, trying to reclaim some sense of control. I thought of the empty walls of my childhood home and the cold text message she'd left behind. "I can't help you," I said, voice cold and final. She looked up, panic in her eyes. "You can't just leave me here." I stepped toward the door. "You left me first, Mom, remember?" I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me. I stood in the parking lot for a long time, staring at the flickering neon sign. The ache in my chest softened, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Relief. For the first time since the house was sold, I felt free. The drive back from Vegas was long and silent. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, my mind spinning with the image of my mother sitting on that stained motel bed. Her sunken eyes, the tremble in her voice, the desperation in her words, they were all burned into my memory. And yet, even after seeing her like that, I didn't regret walking away. For the first time in months, I felt in control. I reached home just after sunrise. Claire was still asleep when I walked into the apartment, the faint scent of her lavender candle lingering in the air. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. This was the life I was choosing, one grounded in trust, not lies. I took a long, deep breath, then walked to the workshop in the garage. The walnut chair I'd been working on stood half-finished by the window. I ran my hand along the smooth grain, feeling every ridge and imperfection. Wood doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. It bends, it breaks, but it always reveals the truth. I picked up the sander and let the familiar hum drown out the echoes of the past. Later that morning, Claire found me there. She didn't say anything, just handed me a cup of coffee and sat on a stool across from me. "How did it go?" she asked softly. Exactly how I expected. I set the sander down and rubbed the back of my neck. She begged for money, said Greg took everything. I told her no. Claire's eyes softened. "I'm proud of you." I smiled faintly. I don't know if proud is the right word. I feel empty and angry and relieved all at once. She reached across the workbench and squeezed my hand. "That sounds about right." We sat there for a long time in comfortable silence, the warmth of her hand grounding me. In the weeks that followed, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I half expected Mom to call me again or show up at my door, pleading for another chance. But she didn't. The silence should have been reassuring, but it left a strange void. The anger that had once fueled me was gone, replaced by something quieter, an ache that I couldn't quite name. One evening, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. There she was, smiling beside me at my college graduation, laughing in the kitchen while frosting a birthday cake, posing proudly in front of the house the day we moved in. I barely recognized that version of her. Was that smile genuine? Or had she been pretending all along? I didn't know anymore. The next day, I went to see Dr. Simmons. "I saw some old pictures of Mom last night," I said, staring at the floor. It felt weird, like I was looking at a stranger. Simmons nodded. "That makes sense. The woman you trusted is gone. The person in those photos doesn't exist anymore. So what do I do with that?" "You accept it," he said simply, "and you let go of the person she used to be, because holding on to that image will only keep you stuck." I left his office feeling lighter, like I'd set down a heavy backpack I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. That weekend, Claire suggested we take a day trip to the coast. We packed sandwiches and drove to a quiet beach just past Santa Cruz. As we walked along the shoreline, the cold ocean wind whipped through our hair. Claire took out her camera and snapped a few photos of the waves crashing against the rocks. "I never understood how you can make water look so sharp," I said, watching her. "You just have to find the right angle," she replied. "Light, shadow, and patience. Everything has its story if you take the time to see it." I thought about that as we sat on a driftwood log, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Every story, I realized, has its cracks and knots, just like wood. And just like wood, those flaws don't define the whole piece. They're simply part of its history. A week later, I finished the walnut chair. I carved the word resilience into the backrest. When Claire saw it, she smiled and traced the letters with her fingertips. "That's perfect," she said. The chair now sits in our living room, next to a shelf lined with small wooden sculptures I've made over the past year. Each piece tells a story: the rough edges of heartbreak, the smooth curves of healing, the sturdy base of resilience. Mom never called again. A few months ago, Amanda texted me to say she heard Linda was in Arizona, still chasing crypto dreams. I didn't reply. Whatever life she was living now, it was hers alone. I had already closed that chapter. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still think about her. I wonder if she ever sits in a cheap motel room, staring at her phone, debating whether to call me. And I wonder if she realizes that the son she once knew doesn't exist anymore. I've learned that some losses don't come with closure. You just learn to live with the scar. And if you're lucky, you find someone like Claire who sees those scars not as signs of weakness, but as proof that you survived. Because survival isn't just about making it through the storm. It's about building a new life in its aftermath. And that's exactly what I'm doing. One piece of wood at a time. Looking back, I've come to understand that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people you love the most, the ones you trust without question. My mother didn't just steal my house or my savings. She stole the foundation of trust I'd built my life upon. And for a long time, I thought I'd never recover from that. But I did. Not because I forgot what happened, but because I accepted it. I stopped trying to understand her motives or justify her actions. I let go of the person I wished she had been and accepted the reality of who she was. I learned that love without boundaries can become a weapon in the wrong hands. That forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. From the house, from the hurt, and from the person who caused it. The scars of that betrayal are still with me. They always will be. But now, when I run my hands over the wood I carve, I see those imperfections as a reminder. Broken doesn't mean ruined. It simply means you've lived. And sometimes, the strongest foundations are built on the lessons we learn after everything falls apart.